the first step towards becoming inclusive is becoming aware that inclusiveness is important, and you want to be inclusive by design rather than make it like a woke agenda point which you want to fulfill. So I think that awareness really needs to be there, and it shouldn't be just like a HR mandate, but rather what people deeply feel inside the company as well, from the top down leadership. Creating an environment for these people to show what is unique about them is another important thing. For example, you do get a lot of people inside who are from different places, and if you don't allow them to be their authentic self, where they can raise their opinions, their honest opinions, without any fear of judgment, then it's not pure inclusiveness. Then it's just that a namesake thing which you're doing. So that should definitely not happen.
Hey everyone, welcome to Product Stories, the podcast that delves into the minds of product and design folks to talk about their stories, challenges, and work. My name is Kaushik, and in each episode, I talk to my guests about how they work, the process they follow, new tools, and the breakthroughs they have had in their career. This week, our guest is Kshipra Sharma, who's currently a lead product designer at RazorpayX. She started her career as an architect before moving into product design. We take a deep dive into understanding concepts like diversity, inclusiveness, and discriminatory practices in design. We also talk about the method and practices which Kshipra and her team adopted to increase diversity in Razorpay's design team and in turn making it an inclusive workspace. We also talk a bit about her journey of taking RazorpayX from 0 to 1 and what it means to be a lead product designer. This is a great episode. I personally enjoyed it. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode. Hey Kshipra, welcome to Product Stories. I'm so happy to have you here. I've been looking forward to having this conversation the entire week. I'm so glad it's finally happening. Uh, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, Kaushik. I am also very happy to be here. I think it's one of those exciting places where you've always wanted to see what happens when you're on the other side. And since I've been more of an audience, it's actually nice to be here with you on the call as well. So, for everyone who's listening to this podcast, I am Kshipra. I'm currently a lead product designer at Razorpay, primarily RazorpayX, and I've been part of many 0 to 1 products over there. I also helped scale the team from 8 designers, like I was the eighth person, to about 85 designers now, but keeping diversity as one of our main criteria while hiring. And apart from that, I also lead the social media charter for Razorpay design team. So if you've ever come across any of our work on Instagram, Twitter, etc., or any of the blogs, I've been part of that whole initiative as well. And yeah, like anything in particular you'd like to know, let me know.
Awesome. Actually, there was a bunch of things which I would want to go over before, I jump into all the questions and topics that I have to talk about. You're someone who actually started as an architect and then moved to design, right? What was that whole journey like? Because I think usually those years actually play such a huge role in what kind of designer you are. But like I feel like always people kind of let it omitted in every conversation they have, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, being an architect was a very pivotal role. So I think when we were back in college, or deciding which college to go to, I was one of those confused people who did not know what they wanted. So I was preparing for engineering, but I knew in the back of my head that I can't just do like pure engineering and want to do something more creative than just a pure logical thing. And somehow, like, I don't come from a design family, and everybody is more into engineering side of things, so they're like, okay, architecture seems like a cool place. It's functional and you get to be creative, and it's a mix of both logic and creativity, and it felt like a safe option at that point. So I joined an architecture college, initially I thought like, I'll probably just see what's it about, and maybe 1 year later I'll figure out again that is it what I want to do. And then I started liking the course quite a bit, especially like I don't know if a lot of people have read this book called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. So I was reading that book during that time when I was just deciding this, and I was very bedazzled by the main character. I was like, yeah, the whole idea of being an architect really struck me through. Then I think it was my first year of internship, and I think a little time after my graduation when I started feeling that okay, architecture as a subject is great. You really get to know about how design influences the way people live and different parts of things. And I think prior to a formal UX design course, it was mostly people who are doing product design or architecture who were leading these decisions. So it was nice and all, but when you come to the corporate world where you have to earn your living through it, I was like, okay, I find this a bit slow. And around the same time, I had a couple of my friends who had joined tech, and somehow that whole idea felt very exciting. That there you make something today, and it's out in the market within like 1 or 2 months, and people are using it, which does not happen in architecture at all. It always takes a long while to materialize ideas. And I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And then the more I learned about tech, like, AR, VR, all these new mediums which are out there, I thought, okay, let's repurpose our skills from architecture to, come to this part of the domain. And that's how I ended up kind of abandoning architecture and moving towards UI UX.
Yes, awesome. That sounds like a very interesting story. Now, like coming to like all the questions which I had. So something which like I noticed when I was like every time before I do these episodes, I do like a thorough research about the guest I'm bringing, right? Something which I noticed is like whether it's like the medium blogs you have written, a lot of things on your website, revolve a lot around like um, diversity in a workplace, right? But diversity in general, whether it's in design or workplace or anything. So something which like I want to ask is like so that like more and more people also understand about it is like why is diversity important?
Hmm. Okay. So I know, like, there's a very textbook answer to this, that, diverse teams are much better placed to solve solutions, and diverse teams work better. There's so much better about diverse teams. Like, if people are coming up with more robust solutions and so on. But I feel this answer is very capitalistic. Like, it's only looking from an ROI lens towards what do people get out of diversity, especially when it comes to monetary value of having such a mindset. But if you're probably at the center of the whole situation, for example, I I feel like when you go into tech, you realize that there's so many men and very little women in comparison, that you start feeling that difference. And it's not like uh, you are part of a very hyper masculine environment. It's not that at all. Like, people around me have been very empathetic towards my experience and so on. But there are times when you just feel that you want someone who is like you to relate to. And there are probably experiences which people of different types of backgrounds experience much differently. And like, sure, being a woman is one way to look at diversity, but it could be from any lens, right? It could be from a regional lens, it could be from a linguistic lens, or it could be from even the LGBTQ lens, that you probably have a different lived experience than most people around you. And if your workplace does not value diversity, you are always going to feel like an outsider to the whole situation. And so that's like the person who's experiencing the lack of diversity answer from their point of view. But the other side to things is also that when you work and interact with people who are of different mindsets, you yourself grow so much as a person. Like I remember when I moved for my postgrad to a different part of the country, I met different people, and probably before that I had a very urban kid kind of an upbringing. And then you realize that okay, reality is very very different. Like it's not just your own echo chamber which is there. Then you also start feeling a lot more mindful towards people who have experiences different than yours. So from that perspective onwards, there are many reasons why diverse workplaces are important. And probably people who are in majority never really realize it as much as people who are in minority. For any kind of minority, like you could take any part of a person's identity and figure out diversity in that sense.
Um, I mean, that's super interesting, especially the part where you said right about how in tech you can you can just see how there is lack of diversity, and something which I have like personally something which have always bothered me is that even the guest panel which I've always had, right? It's predominantly men and less women. Even though I've actively tried to bring on more guests from women, it's still been like a huge challenge in itself. So I think for me, even from that lens, it's very clear that that there is lack of diversity. And another thing which you were talking about, whether it is like in terms of like minorities and all these things. I was just watching this speech or talk by Michelle Obama, which was talking about how the whole concept of imposter syndrome is very predominant in minorities because they're always made to feel like they don't belong where they are. So I think in if from that perspective, I definitely agree that that having diversity in a workplace is extremely important, especially a company taking giving importance to diversity itself. I'll move to the next question, which is like you were like the eighth designer in Razorpay, and you took the team to like 85 or 80, if I'm not wrong, the numbers. And while keeping diversity in mind and everything. So what was that like, and what kind of hiring practices did you follow to ensure that there is actually diversity in the hiring?
Right. Just want to make one thing clear that I didn't single-handedly do everything. I had like a whole bunch of amazing colleagues helping me out, but I was one of the initial members who was also part of the whole hiring game. Um, yeah, so I think there was this one pivotal point when back in I think March 2020 where we realized that okay, we are I think 25 or 28 member strong team, but we didn't have enough women designers. And I know like diversity could mean a lot of things, but that was like the more visible criteria for us to tackle. So initially it was like okay, people were like it's not like we didn't want a diverse team or we were actively against not hiring women. Nothing like that happened. It was just that we were slightly passive about it. Ki, yeah, we need to have more women and so on. And because of that, every time when we ended up hiring, the majority of the people ended to be male. And that was like a point where I think I was discussing with a colleague that, this needs to change because for me, as someone who's inside the team, I had started feeling that, okay, there are a couple of experiences which probably are very specific to where you come from. For example, for example, you have a chai break in your office and people go to the pool table to play. Now, I wouldn't say that women don't like to play pool, but like for the remaining three people out there who were women, we didn't like to play pool. But we felt like completely outside during the chai breaks that we don't have anybody to talk to, or what do we do now. And at that point it was slightly alienating that okay, I probably wish that there were more women in the team so that we also could enjoy our chai breaks instead of being in front of the computer with another colleague of ours. Then there was this other example that I think almost all women have faced, is that whenever you're in a meeting room, somehow you end up being the only person there. And back then, when it was physical spaces predominantly, when we used to work from office, and when you're much younger in the whole industry, you feel these differences in a lot more intensified manner than you once you've matured and you've learned that okay, this probably doesn't shouldn't feel like a big issue to you personally. So I think for me it was all of that you feel that you wish this team was much more diverse, and you want to take a couple of inclusive steps around it. So I shared this experience with a colleague of mine, and we decided that hey, let's bring this up to the larger team, hiring team, that okay, this is becoming a bit of a concern, and if we don't act now, we'll probably be even more marginalized as a team as compared to what happens if we start taking steps right now. And I and this friend of mine, we started writing things that what all we could change. What we did was we relooked at this entire hiring funnel from start to the end, and we've in fact read up a couple of articles here and there. And what we decided that okay, let's look at these things entirely from your diverse criteria perspective, and looking at it specifically from female perspective, that what could be a deterrent to you to not be excited in coming forth, or what could be a deterrent to you in showing what are your best skills in the job interview, right? So we started looking at these things. We thought that okay, maybe we should rewrite our JDs to be a bit more welcoming to people, especially when you look at people who are with families, like women who are mothers, and they're handling a household and so on. So if you just like write your JDs like okay, this is like a ton of stuff you need to do, and do it within like 8 hours. So like work life balance for these people is much more important. And if they feel overwhelmed with the amount of things you want them to do, they'll probably not apply. So that's one way that you relook at your JDs. We advertised our roles that okay, we are looking for women, and if you are interested, we would definitely like to talk to you, and make sure that you apply and at least try the whole interviewing process. During our interviewing process, we looked at our panels. We made sure that at least there's one woman on the panel whenever we are hiring for, just so that there's more confidence while hiring. Even the task rounds which we were giving out, we were trying to make sure that all different types of personalities are able to go through that task round, and it doesn't feel like a mammoth task. So like initially we used to have only a whiteboarding challenge, which was in person. We offered that okay, what if we have um, takeaway task also, so that there are people who work better when they are grilled in a meeting room, and they can come up with better answers. And there are people who probably work better when they are given the time to sit, research, and come up with a thought through answer. So we were looking at things from that perspective. And most importantly, the way we were looking at people, we just wanted to make sure that we weren't hiring for a personality type which is shining through the process, which eventually ends up being a cishet male. So once we just realize that criteria needs to be that, okay, what all positives someone brings to the table, rather than trying to look that, okay, is it matching that one particular persona we have in our heads. We realized that a lot more number of people were actually uh, getting through the whole thing. And very very amazing team we've put together finally, with these couple of changes in our whole hiring process, that I think now we are 85 people, but we have like 25-30 women inside the team, which in itself is a big number inside the tech industry.
It's a huge accomplishment, right? If you think about it, because like taking a team from 88 to 85 people is like a tough job in itself, and while ensuring like there's enough diversity in the team and everything. So yeah, I mean like that's like an amazing work both from you and all your colleagues who were involved. So coming to my next question, right, which is around around the same similar thing, which is what steps can say a company today or a team today start taking, which can make the workplace more inclusive, or it can improve the inclusivity in the workplace.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question and a very important one as well. I think the first step towards becoming inclusive is becoming aware that inclusiveness is important, and you want to be inclusive by design rather than make it like a woke agenda point which you want to fulfill. So I think that awareness really needs to be there, and it shouldn't be just like a HR mandate, but rather what people deeply feel inside the company as well, from the top down leadership. So I think that's like the first criteria. The second thing is that once you start looking at inclusiveness from that lens, that okay, we are not trying to always look at people who are just like us. There might be people who are different, but if they are able to fulfill what the role requires, it's all right. It doesn't have to be in that same lens which we are all used to, right? So that is another way of looking at your hiring. um, Creating an environment for these people to show what is unique about them is another important thing. For example, you do get a lot of people inside who are from different places, and if you don't allow them to be their authentic self, where they can raise their opinions, their honest opinions, without any fear of judgment, then it's not pure inclusiveness. Then it's just that, a namesake thing which you're doing. So that should definitely not happen. And once you empower people to, say things which probably might be uncomfortable truths, but, once you empower them to do that, it definitely helps bring out so many things which probably you yourself wouldn't realize as a leader inside a company. So, creating that culture of sure, you have discussions which are productive, maybe even focusing on things which may be uncomfortable to deal with, but with the whole aim of getting better at the solution rather than being defensive about it, and being aware that these problems exist is what I would say in the nutshell.
Yeah, I think another thing is that there are there are companies and teams who want to practice inclusivity, but they simply don't know where to get started. So I think that is also a very common problem which I've noticed among teams and companies.
Oh yeah, I think it also stems from the fact that, like when you are in an engineering college, almost it starts from there. Like engineering colleges, you don't have enough women out there, and then I think now, luckily, like the criteria of being an entrepreneur is not just engineering, but when you start building your team. from the get go, you just pick up like your closest friends and you start working with ideas with them. So if probably right then and there, you make sure that, this is something you're going to tackle at some point early in the whole startup journey rather than later, is when you'll realize that it can be solved. Like, for example, I feel at Razorpay and in general, I've seen in a lot of startups where women leaders have been part of the journey from the initial stages. It's a lot more diverse, friendly culture to inculcate inside the company. In Razorpay, I think it was our HR head and chief of staff, Anuradha Bharat, and she being at the helm of things of what culture at Razorpay stands for has really helped us bring in a lot of inclusivity in the workplace.
It, again, kudos to all of you for doing such a wonderful job at that. So you have also written a bunch of things related, like discriminatory practices in design, right? In like designing products, and at the same time, I was also reading this book. I think it's called Invisible Woman. I'm not able to recollect the book name.
Oh yeah, it's the film one.
Basically, the one with the green
Red,
and
blue.
red. Yeah, yeah, that one. And there were so many things, like the whole, I think the first chapter of the book itself is so eye opening, because it talks about all the things and how it is, how things designed in the world is like predominantly for male and not for women. And uh, we have like since then not made any sort of effort to like make it more inclusive or anything. So yeah, I mean, coming back to my question is that, like what are like some of the discriminatory practices that happen in design?
I feel in general, designers feel because we're empaths by our profession, we should be accommodating to all. But at times, I feel we tend to miss out on a lot of things because we feel we already know it all. So, for example, when you are going for user research, the easiest and the most convenient way, which most people do user research, is pick the topmost chunk of people who are available and do a user research with them. And this sometimes underrepresents certain groups of people. For example, uh, if you go for a finance app and by default just pick the top players, you'll always find them to be men. So, would prefer that user research has a diverse group to begin with, so that everybody has their voice when the final product comes into the picture. The second thing, which is slightly away from practice but more about the design culture, is that there's a lot of misconception about what a designer should look like. So at times you may have seen that, the moment you mention someone's a designer, you'll see that you'll expect them to have a set of clothes, Mac, and the way they dress up, and maybe they'll be all coffee aficionados and so on. So I feel like because of that, people who are a little different from this side of what a designer looks like feel like outsiders to the whole thing, or they feel like, okay, it's not exactly my space, right? Third thing, which in design practice, is that at times, especially when we are young as designers, we feel that we are the designers and we are the only voice of the user out there in the company. And we have a lonely, tough job, but it's not that as designers, no one would know better than us at all, especially about the users. There's so many people inside the company who are representing the users in different ways. They may have different intents. For example, salespeople talk to a lot of users. Even product managers are part of a lot of user research. So it's not like just what the designer knows is the absolute. There are enough people out inside the team as well. So feel that all these thoughts in our head where we feel like we're better than everyone else, we could probably take a step back and reevaluate how we are looking at our practice and our whole profession.
It's kind of funny because I'm sitting here wearing a black t-shirt using a Mac.
I know
But
it's very common, right? Like you'll expect, and even I feel like I've become a trope at times, but you'll see that you'll just expect designers to be in a certain way, very nice stuff which they carry, aesthetic pictures which they post, and so on.
I think I definitely agree with the finance part as well, because I have noticed this very commonly how these practices happen, especially with financial products. And I think it's also very predominant in crypto space in general, because most of the crypto space is actually like uh, predominantly white male, in mostly actually in the US, right? So this is like another thing which I also noticed when it comes to in fintech space and crypto space. But at the same time, right, we most of us understand that so these problems exist, and um, and like we are aware about these problems and issues and everything. So how do we go about actually fixing them through design?
Yeah, I don't know if I really have the answer to what would be a way, but I feel the first way is definitely promoting people who are from this diverse background. For example, promote women artists on NFT spaces, or even just promote or empower people who are already there in that space, so that you have this signaling which happens, which allows people to identify someone like them to come into that space as well. So that's the first bit which I feel is it's really helpful. I think I'm looking at this from that side, that when you're younger and you're looking at leaders, and if you see someone like you're very likely to be like, oh, this is someone who I could admire and want to be like when I grow up. So I think that signaling is very important in the first space, and the second thing is creating that space where they are allowed to talk about their experience. And the third thing is obviously, if you feel someone's wanting to be there and not there, just nudge them towards coming towards places uh, where they can learn about, let's say, crypto or NFT. I feel that's particularly important when you're younger, but it does not die down when you get older. Because for me, like when I was just like 1 year into the design industry, I remember my mentor used to be like very active about why aren't you talking, why aren't you asserting your opinions at this point, and so on. And that whole nudge in itself was a big confidence boost for me. Like I think right after the meetings they'd be like, okay, listen, you said this and that's great, you should also add this because you had this point. And instead of thinking that you want to narrow down your narrative, make sure to take up that space and assert your identity while talking about these things. So like coming back, if you empower people to talk about their experiences both inside and outside, and if you nudge them towards these directions, I'm sure that we'll start seeing a lot more number of people who are in that space who are benefiting out of the whole Web3 wave which is coming in.
Interesting. That's definitely there for sure. I mean, I think it's happening, but it's again super slow, and it's going at its own pace. But at the same time, let's probably like zoom out a bit and like talk a bit more about your work and what you're doing at Razorpay. So you're actually working on the neobanking product, right? Which is like, I think one of like Twitter's, especially all the startup founders who hang out on Twitter, one of the favorite products. So yeah, I have one simple question, which is like, how did you actually take RazorpayX from 0 to 1, and what were all the challenges like, and what were the all the challenges you face, and how you solved them?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question, and the project is also one of my most proud achievements in my span as a in my career span as a designer. So what I feel that when you build a 0 to 1 product, almost everything feels exciting because you're doing everything from scratch. But there are also a lot of challenges and constraints which you are working under, because MVPs are more of validation of an idea in your head. You don't want to put in so much effort that the effort outlasts the way you would pivot in the future, right? Like if you put in too much effort, it becomes too much investment as well, very early before even validating your ideas. The second thing is you're trying to build fast. So at times, right at the start, maybe your experience gaps may not be addressed that seamlessly. You'll probably have to do a lot of beta testing, user research, trying to figure out what you're trying to build. And at that point, it may feel a little underwhelming when you see the final product, because initially you think, okay, we are doing this very cool thing from scratch, and then when you see an MVP, you feel like, okay, there are a lot of experience gaps. But the idea at that point is usually to build fast, and uh, at that point as a designer you have to maybe let go of some things, or scope a lot of things depending on what would be the best thing to build to validate ideas rather than satisfy yourself as a designer.
Awesome. So I've actually never used Razorpay X product, but I have used the Razorpay product, which like you used to accept payments and stuff. Like when I was freelancing, when I had few side projects, or I used to sell few merchandise and stuff. So one thing which like I've always loved about Razorpay is that it's so simple to set up something, and like just getting started with like accepting payments and stuff. So why I am telling this is because like back, like I think this was around 2014 or something, or probably 2013, I don't remember. I was like just getting out of school, and I was trying to start like a business or something. And like I wanted to set up a website where I could like accept orders and stuff. And I remember how at that point of time, if you wanted to set up something like that, you needed to have a registered company, and that registered company should have a current account, and only then you get like a payment gateway access, and only then you could start accepting orders. There was definitely PayPal and everything, but I think PayPal also came with like huge transaction fees and everything. And it was actually not that simple to use PayPal also, that for some reason. But yeah, I like completely understand how much of a game changer product Razorpay was. And another thing which I recollect when I think about Razorpay is like, so basically like one of my teachers, like when I was in 12th grade or something, was actually from IIT Roorkee, and he was like batchmates with one of the founders. So I actually remember Razorpay from like the Y Combinator days, and when they
Oh,
raised money
wow.
first from Tiger Global. So yeah, I've always been like super fascinated with Razorpay, that in that way. And I also remember when like Razorpay was just one single floor in that building, that office.
Wow.
uh, yeah, I think Y Combinator conducted the first event when they came to India there. I think this was back in 2016, and that's when I remember visiting Razorpay's office. So I've
Wow.
always like loved the product like from um,
It's
quite a
always
long
nice
time.
to hear the story. Like, I think it's been 3.5 years for me, but I always like to hear these stories about the product.
Yeah. And it's always and the thing is like the Razorpay office is in like a very prominent location in Kormangla, right? And it's very it's not hard to miss. And it's like a beautifully designed office, so that is also there.
Yeah, I think for me as well, when I moved to Bangalore, the fact that Razorpay is in Koramangala and everything is in walking distance. There's Bob's Bar and Social and Fenny's right across. I think like that was one of the bigger excitements for me while joining the workplace. Like, wow, people hang out here on daily basis.
Well, like coming back to your journey as a designer and everything. So you are actually like the lead product designer at the moment. So there are like different roles, right? Which is like when you're starting out as a junior product designer, then you move to being a senior product designer, and then it's like lead and probably then VP role or director role, etc.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there's also a design
So
manager somewhere
oh yeah,
there.
I'm so sorry. I forgot about that. But yeah, one thing which like I want to ask is like what is actually the difference between like being a senior product designer and being a lead product designer?
So for me as well, this role shift is very recent. Like I think it's only been few months now, but the way the role scales up is that when you're a senior product designer, you're basically expected that you have all your user insights and you're able to handle product delivery or design delivery on your own, but you take inputs from someone else so that you are aware that you're in the correct direction. When you become a lead, you become that person who is giving those inputs to other senior product designers that, hey, maybe why don't you do it this way? Why don't you take this decision? And so on. So you become that person. Also, I think when we are at junior or SPD level, we are a little bit more tactical about what are our user requirements. Meaning that if you get a project and you realize like, okay, this is kind of the problem statement which we are looking at, you'll then go ahead and do some user research to validate that. And then once you get that heads up that okay, this is the thing which you're trying to build, you'll go ahead and build it. So it's slightly tactical to what exactly is your next problem which you're going to come across. But when you transition to a lead, probably you need a lot more understanding of who the user is, so that you're not just looking at the next project which is coming your way, but rather the whole roadmap of what's going to happen in the quarter or uh, throughout the year, so that you're building with projects which actually align to your central strategy as the company. So that whole aspect starts coming in a lot more. And maybe you also learn to not take up all the hands-on design work yourself, but empower other people to learn from these smaller projects, especially people like junior product designers who are just joining fresh out of college or very new into the company. So you are basically trying to scale them up as well to do the hands-on work so that you could focus more on the strategic work of a designer.
So, one of the questions which I have been regularly asking with my guests is like, what does a day in their life look like? Working at Razorpay, or if it's like working at Google or something. So this is to like mostly ask like, because if someone's listening and like if they're thinking about like applying uh, for Razorpay or whichever company that is, right? They understand like what is it like to work at a company like Razorpay? So,
All right. Yeah, I think you should ask me like what my week looks like than my day, because I think every day is slightly different. But usually, like once you start working, it's the planning meetings which are mostly the first thing which you come to in the morning, be it a stand up or a sprint meeting, or even those catch ups where you're trying to figure out that, what you've built and how's that going. So it's more of that in the initial part of the day. But then you also have a couple of stakeholder meetings. For example, if you're working on a project with a product manager, you'd be, actively in touch with them and trying to understand, like, if there have been any latest developments on their side, or what have you learned in the past couple of weeks, so that everybody's aligned on, the problem statement, who our users are, and what's really happening. And even, you'd want to do your one-on-ones around sometime, so that let's say everybody's having a manager, so you know that you're on the right path of where you're working. And if someone is reporting to you, or you are mentoring them, then you can basically get a check of their work. So, like, basically, these meetings are throughout the week, not that every day is one meeting. And then there are a couple of hours where you thankfully can do some focus work. So it could be, reading what's going to come up next, any strategy documents, or any product requirement documents which are coming your way. Or it could be hands-on design. So if there's a deliverable which is, like, coming around the sprint, and you need to close on some design requirements, a couple of those hours. And yeah, like, once in a few days you always have some bucker meeting, just so that you can also unwind with your colleagues, and you don't feel like, you're working in a silo and it's all just work. So that's most of the day.
That sounds awesome. And if if anyone here who's listening thinking about applying to Razorpay, they should probably reach out to you and have a conversation.
Oh yeah, happy to help, happy to talk.
Anyways, we are pretty much reached the end of the episode, and I usually end my episodes with asking a bunch of rapid fire questions. So if you're ready, we can get started.
Yeah, I'm as ready as ever.
Okay, awesome. First question: one designer that you really admire.
One designer that I really admire. I really like Malika Favre's work. So she's more of a graphic designer, but the way she represents things, very minimal, very geometric shapes, but so many emotions. I love her work.
Okay, awesome. My next question is a brand that you believe practices, inclusive design.
I think IDEO does that, and I think even Spotify does that. Definitely, I feel Spotify would have something, because the way they are building their product, it feels like they're really listening to the users.
Okay, awesome. um, my next question is if you could describe, your journey starting as an architecture student to where you are right now, in one single word, how would you describe it? What word would you describe it?
Um, okay, there's one word, right? Can I use two? Like, I think it would be mostly winging it, or maybe something around the lines of being open to what comes your way.
Okay, cool.
It's not a word.
Uh,
It's
so
not a sentence.
so it's mostly being open.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, being open. That, I think that would be the word if I had to select it.
Okay. My last question. This is one question which I've been pretty much asking all my guests. It's like a fun question which I'm been trying. If you had to worry about nothing, whether it is career, job, money, etc., what would you be doing right now? What would you be working on right
I really like being in design, but I think I would like to stick to the storytelling aspect of design more. So maybe you can say that, but I don't know what medium I would be working with. So mostly storytelling.
now? Okay. So what? what makes you, I mean, think about storytelling when I ask this question?
Oh, okay. There's a follow up. Yeah, I think with stories and also with design, there is this ability to see the world from a different point of view, right? And I think we do that very frequently in design where we wear the user's shoes and try to figure out whether they would like what you're building. So I think that really happens when there is empathy, and that empathy is built always with storytelling. And with that whole um, having another user as the first person and you being the observer of their life, I feel that it really allows you to experience things which are beyond just your own perspective. And I find that very cool. I find it like, okay, it's very freeing that you could do these things in today's world.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. This was like a wonderful episode, at the same time, extremely informative. I enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. I hope you enjoyed too. But again, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Product Stories for more such episodes.